And it was around this time I was really having faith struggles again. And I felt like my shelf is breaking. And I was like, we're planning to get married. We're planning to get sealed in the temple. Like, if I lose my faith, like, maybe this isn't the right decision, getting married.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Saints Unscripted. We're back with Stephen Murphy, who is the host of the YouTube channel Mormonism with the Murph. This is part 2 of our interview. So if you've not seen part 1 yet, go watch part 1. We talk about Stephen's background in the church and him deciding to leave the church and come back. So we're going to continue learning more about Stephen's journey back into the church. And we're going to talk more in this episode about him meeting his wife and some of the challenges that went on as they were trying to get married. Does that sum it up, Stephen? Should we just get into part 2? Should we continue?
Yeah, let's get into part 2.
Okay. Thanks for being here, everyone.
So, this next sort of part of my story is sort of some of the obstacles and challenges I faced, after I got engaged to my soon-to-be wife, and all the obstacles that we went through in order to get married.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Let's dive in.
A couple of weeks after I came back to the church, I went to a YSA convention, and my wife, who I didn't know was my wife then, she had just moved from Mexico to Ireland to do an English course, so she was only there for a few months. She was living in Dublin, and we met at that YSA convention, and then we started dating, and she renewed her visa to stay for an extra 6 months and then for a full year. So we started dating, and then we got engaged. It was August 2020, so it was during lockdown, and it was really during lockdown where I was having some of my faith struggles again, because everything had shut, and I was like, a lot of the issues were kind of resurfacing in my mind as well. So I was like watching podcasts again and doing more research and having more faith struggles. And her visa to be in Ireland ended in March 2021. She had to go back to Mexico, and we were planning to get married that July in Mexico, so a Mexican wedding. And we kind of thought, whenever we planned the date, we kind of thought, oh, COVID won't be an issue in 2021. Then another lockdown came, so we were planning to get married in Mexico in July, and then for her to come back to the UK to be with me. And this is kind of complicated, but we had to get a visa for her to come back in the UK, like a marriage visa, and it's like ridiculously difficult to get the visa, and it costs like $3,500 to be like with the person you love. Like it's
that's
terrible. And to make matters worse, I was in my final year of university, so I had big assignments and dissertations, and I was bouncing between 3 jobs, because financially, to meet the criteria, I had to earn above, I think it was like $18,500. So that required me to be working like 40, 50-hour weeks plus all the university assignments. So there's a lot at stake getting the visa. And it was around this time I was really having faith struggles again. And I felt like my shelf is breaking. And I was like, we're planning to get married. We're planning to get sealed in the temple. Like, if I lose my faith, like, maybe this isn't the right decision, getting married. This is kind of bad. So I was in real crisis mode. And in April 2021, it was General Conference. And I sort of went to General Conference like a broken man, like, Lord, help mine unbelief. Like, I'm struggling here. I really need, some sort of spiritual assurance or some message, about like, am I making the right decision for my life? And is the church, true? And are we led by prophets? And because I was just dealing with so many issues that I had, and I was getting absolutely nothing out of General Conference. It was just like the same old talk, talk after talk. And I was just really just disappointed and felt like nothing's addressing what I'm going through. And then President Nelson gave his address. I think it was in the Sunday morning session, and his talk was about faith to move mountains. And I can't remember everything in his talk, but he talked about how if we exercise even like a particle of faith, like faith the size of a mustard seed, that it can move mountains in our life. And there were two big mountains I was dealing with. One was doubt and all the issues I had, but two was like the mountain-sized obstacles I saw ahead of like getting the visa, flights to go to Mexico, COVID. And I didn't even foresee all the problems that lay ahead, but I saw those two mountain-sized obstacles. And his address was like, if you have faith, like God can move those mountains and help you to overcome those obstacles. And the spiritual sort of impression I had after was that, this is the right decision, this is the right time, and that there's going to be all these problems, but if you have faith that, God will sort of bring it to pass, that a miracle will come. And another sort of important factor was, so I was going to be starting a teacher training course in September, and I had to be earning $18,600 for the previous year. So we kind of had to get married in July. If we didn't get married in July, then I wouldn't be able to meet the financial criteria and we couldn't be together. So there's kind of like a lot at stake.
And you're not talking US dollars, you're talking your loan currency. Pounds.
Yeah, I don't know what that would translate in US, so maybe like 24, 25 grand.
Okay.
Which to me, like I was a student, so it was quite a bit.
Yeah.
It was a very stressful and uncertain time, those next few months, and we were having just so many issues of all these documents we needed for the visa. And one of my jobs was self-employed, and there was so much documentation that we needed. We were meeting with lawyers. It was just problem after problem. My flights canceled like 4 times, and I kept having to rebook another flight, and it just was not looking good. And it was like, could Mexico go on the red list? And if it was on the red list, then I have to pay thousands to go in a hotel.
What's the red list? Is that like lockdown because of COVID?
That's if you travel there, you have to isolate for like 14 days and pay a ridiculous amount of money. So like there is a lot of problems that could have went wrong. And I remember during the middle of it, I felt really discouraged and defeated, and was kind of like, are all these sort of obstacles, are they like signs that maybe this is the wrong decision and we should just like, let's just either call it off or postpone? I remember there was this quote that came up on Instagram, and I cannot remember what the talk was, where it's from. I'm not making it up, but it was Elder Jeffrey R. Holland, and it said something along the lines of, God didn't bring you this far to bring you this far. Like, don't panic, don't retreat. Like, God will sort of open the way. And whenever I read it, I was like, is this like a message? Is this like a sign? Like, it gave me a lot of like hope and faith, and it sort of confirmed the spiritual impression I had that, like, have faith, this is the right decision, and God will bring it to pass. But it really was an exercise of faith, because I did not know what the outcome was going to be. And I was this was kind of like the final straw. I was like, I'm putting my faith in this, but if this doesn't work out, this might break my shell, break my testimony. And so more challenges were happening. I needed a document to get married in Mexico. They make it really difficult to get married. It is not easy to get married. I had to send it to get it apostilled and signed by a legislator, and then it got lost. And like, just everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And it was impairing our relationship, because every time we talked at night, it was just like dealing with problems. Yeah. Like the wedding planning is meant to be the stressful part. That was the easy part.
Really?
Planning the wedding. It was tough. And I remember a couple of days before I was meant to fly to Mexico. Oh, and by the way, I was hearing different voices from different people. So some people were saying to me, like, have faith, love conquers all, you'll get there. And then some people were saying to me, maybe you shouldn't do this. Like, it seems like just there's too many problems. And part of me like was starting to think, like, if I make it there, this will be a miracle, like, because so many things could go wrong. A couple of days before, I had my flights booked, and then I realized I couldn't travel through the States, which was a complete just oversight on my part. And I was trying to look for flights that didn't connect through the States, and I couldn't find anything. And the only direct flights were just like way beyond what I could afford. And this was a couple of days before I was meant to be leaving. And this was just kind of like a defeated moment. I was like, it's done. Like, I'm not going to make it. This is too much. I remember talking to my fiance on the phone and just being like, I think I just can't do this anymore. It's too stressful. And she was really upset, and kind of felt like I'm just giving up. Where's your faith? Like we should do whatever it takes to, to get married and to be together. And I just kind of felt like I was at the end of the road. Like just everything was going against us. And then I sort of had this impression to pray again, go to God, pray again. And I was just like, Heavenly Father, please help me to find a flight to get to Mexico. If this is your will, if this is the right decision, I am exercising the tiniest particle of faith right now. Please help me out. And that was literally, my faith was like a tiny seed. Like I did not have strong faith at this time. And the next day I contacted an airline and they were able to find me a flight that didn't go through the States. It was only £13 more. And I was just like, happy day. I was like, why couldn't I find that yesterday? And then the document I needed to get married in Mexico, it had gone missing. So I was calling customer services like constantly, like, where's this document? When am I going to get it? And they're like, oh, we can't guarantee when it'll come when it comes. And I was like, I'm going to Mexico on Tuesday. I need this document. And, we were just praying like mad. And it came the day before the flight. My COVID test came back, negative. So everything was all clear. And I got on the flight and I made it to Mexico. And to me, it just felt like a miracle because there were so many things that could have gone wrong that could have stopped it. And then when I got there, like, it was just like peace. It was just like, and we had like a beautiful wedding day and we got sealed in the temple and, great honeymoon. It was like that stressful chapter of my life and all those obstacles. That was all just like the previous chapter. And I looked back and I was really grateful that I didn't give up, that I didn't throw in the towel, even when it seemed like all hope was lost. And it made me think of a talk by Elder Holland about casting not away, therefore, your confidence, BYU devotional he gave years ago. And he talked about how like often before like big spiritual moments or like important spiritual decisions that like opposition can come. And he talked about the story of Moses and the children of Israel, coming to the Red Sea and, they were delivered, all the plagues in Egypt, and then they were being delivered. And then when they came to the Red Sea, they were like, good one, Moses, like you brought us this far now, the Egyptians are going to kill us. Like, what are you playing at? And then, Moses told them like, have faith, God will deliver you. And, the Red Sea parted and they were able to walk through. And to me, it felt like all these obstacles was like my Red Sea, and that pressing forward in faith, the little faith I had, that it was like the Red Sea parted. And to finish off the story, so whenever I came back from the honeymoon, she stayed in Mexico and I came back to Northern Ireland on my own, which kind of sucked, and I had to quarantine.
I bet.
Days. Not an ideal way to start your marriage, but what can you do? The week after I came back, Mexico went on the red list. So it meant had I have come home a week later, I would have had to isolate in a hotel and pay thousands of pounds. So Mexico was on the red list, and it also meant that she couldn't come to be in North Ireland, but we were waiting on the visa. And we were just, fingers crossed and praying that we would get approved for the visa, because if you get declined, that's your money gone. Like, you ain't getting it back. And it was about 3 months, which is kind of like the usual time frame. And we got the visa. And it was the same week she got the visa that Mexico went on the green list and she could come to Northern Ireland. And, either I'm just a pretty lucky guy and everything just worked out for me, or there was someone up there who was looking out for us. And yeah, it was a real faith promoting experience that, like, even if your faith is like the size of a seed, that miracles can still happen. And like, even if you have all this doubt and all these concerns and all this unbelief, like, that's okay, but God still wants you to turn to him and have faith. And yeah, I feel like that's kind of been like part of my story. Like, Lord, I believe, like, I have these faith promoting spiritual experiences, but then I have, there's doubt and there's messiness and there's complexity and there's concerns that I'm wrestling with.
Your story about these obstacles that you faced as you're trying to get married reminds me of Nephi at the beginning of the Book of Mormon, as he's on his quest to recover the brass plates from Laban. And he is writing this account in First Nephi after the fact. So the events have already happened, and he's then remembering it and writing it down. And he says, I was in the streets of Jerusalem. I had no idea where to go. But the Spirit led me to where I needed to go. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, he was able to see the Lord's hand throughout these difficult events, leading him to where he needed to be. And it sounds like that's kind of what you experienced is, you have all of these complicated things happening in your life, and then they all work out in the end, and you look back and you're like, there's no way that should have worked out.
Yeah. And I read so many of those passages and stories, and in the middle of it, it was like, oh, it's easy for them to say, like, that's in the past. And I was like, this is a leap of faith, and I didn't know how it was going to work out. And I was like, if this didn't work out, this would be really faith challenging, because I'm putting a lot on these spiritual impressions and what I thought was, revelation at the time. But yeah, it was super cool sort of spiritual experience that I had.
So you got married how long ago? Has it been a year?
Year and a half.
Year and a half?
Yeah.
Is your wife with you now?
She is, yeah.
Soon?
We're together.
And where are you at as far as your faith goes at this point? I mean, I guess about, 7-8 months ago, you started your own YouTube channel, which we talked about, Mormonism with the Murph. I guess, where are you at with your faith now, and how does your channel tie into that?
Yeah, so over the past year, one thing I've had to deal with is I've had a lot of friends and family members who have either lost their faith and left the church, or who are in a faith crisis, and they're bringing up just a lot of the same issues that I had, and we're just really struggling with these things. And it was nice in a way that made me realize that I'm not alone. I'm not like a black sheep.
Yeah. That all these questions you're having, they're not new.
Yes, they're not new. And I realized that maybe I felt in some of those conversations that I didn't have the best intellectual or apologetic answers. I tried to, this is maybe what the faithful position might be. But I felt that, I really need to, confront some of these things, really try to address them, and in a, sort of fair and in a balanced way. Because I do, I have sort of epistemic humility, despite a lot of my experiences, and I do, they're important to me, and I take them into account. But I have a lot more epistemic humility when it comes to me knowing things. And I'm always open to new information, new evidence. I'm open to listening to, different points of view and different perspectives. And I also did a debate week at school as a trainee teacher, and it was all about debates and looking at the arguments for and against, and so people can make sort of an informed decision or conclusion. And kind of that with, my friends and family concerns, and also sort of still dealing and navigating my way through, I sort of decided that I'm going to start a channel that tries to dive into controversial things in the church history, or things that critics, evidence they would use to attack the church's truth claims, and try to really confront it and navigate my way through and try to come to some sort of a resolution, and to try my best to just provide content that's kind of fair and balanced. Because sometimes one thing I've noticed is both sides can be guilty of bias, and when you present the information that can support, and I think I want to try my best to be unbiased, although none of us can do it. We're all biased.
Sure. And
we all interpret different things differently. So what is a big issue to one person may not be to another. So yeah, I've, done different sort of church history topics. I brought on, some scholars, like people like Brian Hales or Stephen Harper, Tyrrell Gibbons, and discussions and dialogue with them. And I've been actually amazed at their willingness to come on and to be asked sort of the tough questions. And it's been
I was going to ask you about that because I mean, I'm kind of in a similar position where we bring on different scholars and whatnot onto our show. And as I write the faith and beliefs episodes of our show, if it's a particularly complex topic, I'll ask for help from different experts in that subject matter. And I have been really just astounded by how kind and willing to help Latter-day Saint scholars have been.
Yeah, they've been so, like, I would say to them, like, I'm thinking of asking these questions. Are you okay with that? And they're like, ask whatever questions you want. Like, they've not been defensive, or they've not criticized me for asking a lot of the questions.
Yeah.
And it's been really nice, and people can come to conclusions if they feel like they're satisfying, but just the fact they're willing to engage and have this discussion. And I've just connected with so many amazing people, either critics or people who have left the church, or people even who are of a different religion. Like, it's just been amazing to connect with people and talk and to hear sort of their stories. And it's been just, an amazing journey. And I'm hoping and striving to, use both the intellectual and the spiritual, your heart and your mind, and to not just, make a rash decision or just follow one. I think both are important, and to try to take things kind of slowly and really try to be balanced and really try to do your research and check sources. We talked a lot about that in our interview, because there's things I've unintentionally been wrong about, or there's more information on a topic. And I think it's important to not just take things at face value and really, really research what people are saying. And then people can come to their own conclusions. And that's kind of my goal. Is I don't want to try to persuade people either way, or use my own story or experience to convince people you must believe the church is true, because I think, they're my personal experiences. The only person they're there to convince is me, and people have to make their own spiritual decisions and come to their own conclusions.
Yeah, definitely. Just kind of as a wrap-up question here, one of the motivators for starting your channel was you were seeing family and friends that were leaving the church, right? So I guess, what advice or message would you extend to those that are watching this interview that might be in a position where they are just learning about some of these difficult topics and are wondering, what route to take, or whether to choose, faith or whatever it may be? What counsel would you give them?
Well, I think you're turning the tables. I think I asked you the same question when you're on mine. Like, first of all, I want to give a disclaimer that I don't want to try to persuade any people that, you must believe it's true, or that because of my experiences that therefore you must believe it's true. I've had people almost bear their testimony at me when I've had doubts, almost as a way to sort of beat you over the head. And, people have to make their own decisions and conclusions. But what I would say if I were to offer counsel is, one, try to be balanced. Look at what critics have to say, that's fine, but really try to look at the faithful position as well. Really look at both sides. Try to be careful and slow with your research. The second thing I would say is try to reach out to people, experts or historians or other people who've been through a faith crisis, and just connect with them. And because it's really healing to just talk about these things. I think one of the reasons why I need to start the YouTube channel is I kept so many things bottled in. I need just an outlet. I think it's just not healthy to keep all these things bottled in. And I think the third piece of advice would just be to be open to God, be open to the spiritual and divine methods. Don't shut that off. Seek learning by study and also by faith. Like, yes, do your research, look at the evidence, use your intellect, but also be open to God and include Him in your faith journey. And hopefully He'll guide you in making whatever spiritual decision is what you feel is right and best for you.
Love it. Fantastic. Couldn't have said it better myself. Speaking of connecting with people, if people have questions for you, where can they go?
You can, message me on Facebook, Stephen Murphy. I also have a Facebook page, Mormonism with the Mur, or an email, stephen.murphy04031996@gmail.com.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Stephen, for being here. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been great to hear your story, and hopefully if people have questions, they reach out to you. And to everybody watching, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.